Well, good morning. It's been a great program so far, and appreciate. Hopefully, you enjoyed yesterday, and we certainly appreciate all the engagement. There's been a lot of feedback and a lot of activity, and we're excited about this. Today, we're going to talk about revitalizing our communities, and it's an interesting time for us. We've spent the last all of us have spent the last several years slugging out of the doldrums, and now the markets are hot again, and things are moving forward again, and it's very easy for us to just move forward and, in some sense, forget about our communities and forget about certainly the less fortunate in our communities. So today I'm excited. We're going to talk about a new way to revitalize communities and using two examples here in the Orlando community. So before I get started, let me introduce our panel. Craig Ustler. Craig is president of Ustler Development, which focuses on urban infill real estate and business development in downtown Orlando. He is a developer of several notable projects, including the GAI Building, 801 North Orange, Thornton Park Central, Eola South, and Osceola Brownstones. These projects represent over $110 million in development activity. Ustler is working on several significant Orlando urban infill projects. Creative Village is a 68-acre urban mixed-use, transit-oriented development at the former Orlando Arena property. The City of Orlando awarded the project to a joint venture between Bank of America Community Development Corporation and Craig. UCF recently announced a major commitment to the project, which plans for over 10,000 students on an urban campus at Creative Village. And what I can tell you about Craig is his projects in Orlando, and not just from a size standpoint, they have been game changers. Certainly the way he approaches projects, the care that he puts into the projects, and the time and the type of projects he's doing, they've all been game changers in Orlando. And a little known fact, Craig and I are fraternity brothers at UF at the same time and know way too much about each other. What happens at the Sigma Chi House stays at the Sigma Chi House. But thanks for being here, Craig.
Thanks.
Steve Hogan is the Chief Executive Officer for Florida Citrus Sports, a nonprofit event management company that is responsible for producing the Buffalo Wild Wings Citrus Bowl, Russell Athletic Bowl, Florida Blue Classic, Florida Citrus Parade, and other Central Florida-based events designed to attract economic impact and ultimately benefit at-risk children and educational initiatives. Steve started his employment at Florida Citrus Sports in 1995 in the events department. He worked his way up to become events manager, assistant executive director, and ultimately interim executive director, CEO. After a nationwide search, Hogan was named the organization's chief executive officer in 2006. Steve has worked tirelessly for the last decade with community leaders to dedicate funding for the reconstruction of the Florida Citrus Bowl Stadium, overcoming significant challenges and a recession which delayed the project. The near $200 million reconstruction received approval in 2012 to move forward immediately following the 2013 bowl season. And I would add, for those of you who haven't been inside the Citrus Bowl, it is fantastic. The bowl season was a tremendous success, and Steve worked tirelessly on that. I would also say, too, and we'll hear today, Steve's heart and his passion for the Paramore community is really one of the inspirations for Lift Orlando. This third guy's a fill-in that we just kind of, brought in. Tom Sittema is the Chief Executive Officer of C&L Financial Group, a leading private investment firm that provides global real estate and alternative investments. Since its inception in 1973, C&L and/or its affiliates have formed or acquired companies with more than $29 billion in assets. In his role as CEO, Mr. Sittema leads a platform of diverse real estate investment trusts and a business development corporation. Tom also serves as CEO and board chair of Corporate Capital Trust, CEO and president of C&L Growth Properties and Global Income Trusts. Prior to joining C&L, Mr. Sittema had a distinguished and successful 27-year banking career with Bank of America Merrill Lynch and Bank of America. Tom also served as the U.S. sector head of REITs and lodging with the responsibility for M&A advisory, equity, and debt capital raising assignments for his client base. Now, let me say this. This in no way has anything to do with the fact that Tom actually chairs C&L Commercial Real Estate's board of directors, and I serve at the pleasure of the chairman. But I have had the, we've got annual reviews next week, right? Yeah, okay. I have had the privilege of seeing Tom's heart for the community and his sincerity, and he truly cares and inspires the team at C&L to really think about how we impact our communities and the communities that we live in. So, Tom, thanks for joining us. So, I'm going to give a brief preamble to this discussion, and it's going to be a Q&A to the panel, and hopefully a discussion will break out. I know it will, and then maybe if we have some time, we'll have some Q&A for the audience. The issue of urban neighborhoods that struggle with poverty, homelessness, crime, and economic disparity exists in every city. The community responses vary and include ignoring the problem, a heavy reliance on charitable efforts, to building around the problem, or economic development within the community that often only displaces the issue or members of the community. Lift Orlando and Creative Village offer two very unique approaches to the issue faced within the Paramore community in downtown Orlando. So the first question for the panel, within that context, can you describe the inspiration, the focus, and the goal of your efforts? How are they different than other approaches, and what do you hope to achieve? Craig, why don't we start with you?
Okay, thanks, Paul. Paramore, for you guys that don't know, that aren't Orlando folks or haven't been here a long time. So this is the classic underserved, under-resourced, sort of cut off African American community that when in a lot of cities, y'all know the model, you put a freeway down the middle of your downtown, there becomes a good side and a bad side, and Paramore is the side that got left out and has faced challenges for decades. And ever since any of us have been here, it's, you know, how do you address those challenges? And it hasn't been for a lack of effort that people have tried to address those challenges. I don't want anybody to think when you hear about our somewhat innovative models, it's because we all of a sudden woke up and felt morally obligated to do something and other organizations haven't. People have been trying forever, but we just think maybe we're onto something a little bit different in how to do it. So when we set out to look at Creative Village, we said, how can we address Paramore, how can we help Paramore, and how can we look at the problems that Paul described? And we built a strategy really around three ideas, and they were essentially that transportation was an issue, and essentially the community couldn't get some of the places it needed to go from a job standpoint. And then education was an issue, and access to education was an issue. This is a neighborhood that, because of the DSEG order, had no public school and was busing to 8 different schools and all that. And then housing, and the lack of affordable housing was an issue. And so Bank of America and us, we toured all over the country, and they have a model that is somewhat different. It's mixed income housing, so you have market rate housing and affordable housing in one building. That's not that innovative, but what they do is actually roll the units. So a unit in and of itself that was an affordable housing unit one year, then the next year becomes a market rate unit, and there never becomes a stigma of that's the affordable unit or that's not, or that's the project building or the public housing building and that's not. So it's a completely integrated strategy for affordable housing, education, and transit that if you put those three things together, our estimation is that's how you can sort of change the trajectory of what's going on. So, I mean, that's evolved. I mean, ultimately, we sit here today about 5 years after our vision, and we've got UCF as a major partner, Orange County Public Schools, Bank of America on the affordable housing side. So we're going to deliver on that promise, and we're going to do it, we think, in a way, same vision these guys have, that now if you're born into Paramore, you're born into opportunity instead of sort of into a bad situation. So, you know, that's the goal, and my motivation ultimately was I think you can use real estate development to address these issues, responsible real estate development to address these issues. So that's how we approached it, and hopefully we'll keep moving the ball down the field, but we've made a lot of progress.
Great. Steve, Tom, do you guys want to set up kind of Lift Orlando and kind of how it formed and your focus today in the Paramore community?
Thank you, Paul, for the invitation, and likewise, you know, board reviews are coming up, and Tom Sittema sits on my executive committee, so
there's a theme.
There's a theme going on here. Yeah. Hopefully,
he's a fan. He looks good today.
He looks great today. So, you know, what's cool, I think, about what we're trying to do in our community, Florida Citrus Sports, our organization is a near 70-year-old effort in this community to really stage college football games as a means to an end to invest, you know, in the community. Really, our job is to fill hotel rooms and put heads in beds. But in the end, if we can utilize that game from 1947 and now games to address children's and educational initiatives in our region. We've always tried to do that. We've always kind of been, to borrow somebody else's term, a mile wide and an inch deep in our impact on the community in that way. And we've done everything in scholarships and camps and so forth and so on. And they're all great, but I'm not sure any one of those things were moving the needle, in any sort of significant way in any one, sector that you could point to. They were all great, but so I think we woke up with the revitalization of the stadium. It was an opportunity, first there was a business reason for doing that, and that was the reason the community pursued it. And we never ran around town pitching, the promise that something else would occur, as you often see with NFL buildings or other cases around the country. But what we did realize when we finally won that battle and we were under construction and things were going to change, a lot of us looked at each other and said, wouldn't it be great? We don't have an NFL tenant, but we'll have an NFL type kind of schedule in our building, television broadcasts and total attendees, all that jazz. And like an NFL team, typically they would utilize the resources driven by a major stadium like that, and they would feed their pro forma, and they would increase their payroll and get better players, so forth and so on. In our case, what if we could actually take the benefits driven by a major NFL-grade stadium and steer those to the benefit of those that actually lived in its immediate shadow? So what if this became a bit of a beating heart in the middle of a community that's been left behind? So, again, ignorantly on my part, it was just more of a dream that we had, a vision. What if we could make this happen? We could have such an order of magnitude impact in our region greater than what we had been doing for decades before all over, kind of the 7-county region. So our vision was really, if we could do this, we could make a big, big difference, and we could focus it on a geography. And actually, Tom and I and a couple of buddies of ours, Bill Diamond and Cy Saliba from Florida Hospital and others, were at a Lee Corso dinner one night that we host every year, and we got to having this discussion, and something lit up that Tom had inside him for a long time. And at that point, he said, "Hey, I'm going to call a meeting," and he gathered us together, and we show up, and we had required reading on day one, or books handed to us, Talks at Charity by Dr. Lupton, and basically the rest is history. So I'll let kind of Tom talk to you. The great thing about my job is I bump into a lot of really, really smart people, and Tom is probably one of the smartest people I've ever met, and matched by his internal passion for taking his knowledge and resources to make a change in his community. So it kind of took off from there. So, Tom.
Thank you, Steve, Paul, and Craig. It's a pleasure to be up here with you, and thank you for having us this morning. So I've been in Orlando just 5 years, came down by way of Charlotte, and honestly had never really been actively involved in sort of community transformation or redevelopment. Like many of you, I was just too busy. I traveled a bunch, had too much going on, and really wasn't that engaged locally in any community because I was on the road so much. Came down here. I live in Winter Park, work downtown, and so I sort of beat the same path to and from work, and that's pretty much all I do. Well, I was here 2 years, and before I even drove into the Paramore and the greater sort of Citrus Bowl, West Lakes area, and I was invited to go to a bowl game on January 1, 2012, and it was the first time that I drove on the west side of I-4 in that area. And I remember I was driving with my wife, and I remember saying to her, "Sweetheart, lock the doors." Wow, this is a pretty tough area. And I'm looking in my rearview mirror, and I see downtown, the office buildings of downtown. So it's literally in the shadow of downtown. And I'm thinking, wow, this is just not a seemingly safe neighborhood. And then I think, okay, and we're hosting 60,000 people today, so this is how we showcase our city. So then my thought turns to that, and then my thought turns to the little kids that I'm seeing walking on the side of the road, and I'm thinking the kids born in this neighborhood have no shot. They don't have a chance. So I sort of just started asking for the next 9 months or so, anybody that would have a view, why is there so much poverty in an area that is in the shadows of downtown? Some would consider it part of downtown. What has been done And as Craig said, there's plenty of work that has been done. Much has been accomplished. But nevertheless, it's a blighted economic area and has been for 50 years. And so I would just be in meetings with local folks and sort of just challenge. I'm a little bit of an instigator, and it's like, what's being done? And obviously, whatever's been done has not sort of created any transformation. And the evening that Steve Hogan mentioned with Bill Diamond and Cy Saliba and others, Sandy Hostetter is in the audience here. We couldn't do anything at Lift Orlando without Sandy. And it's sort of like, how can we spend $210 million on a football stadium and not think about the environment that stadium, the ecosystem that is housed within? And so we just said, let's figure this out. We can figure it out. And our view is the business community has a distinct role, whether it's real estate professionals, and many of you are sort of front and center and have an unbelievable ability to transform communities just by virtue of the vocation that you are all in. And businessmen and women with vision and resources and the ability to convene, to play a role as statesmen or women, not a political role, but a transformational kind of role, can really drive an agenda that spans politics, spans whatever political side of the equation you are on, and really can drive for results. So that's sort of was the origin of it.
Thanks, Tom. It's a unique time to be talking about these projects as you think about it. And the thing that strikes me about what I know about both projects is there's been a lot of patience. I mean, it's not, hey, we're just going to go in and do this, or we're going to go in and fix this, or we're going to go in and build this. There's a lot of thought going into both projects. There's a lot of patience, a lot of planning. And both efforts are going to rely on a high level of support and community engagement, as opposed to just rolling in and doing something. So can you talk about, Craig, we'll start with you. Can you just talk about how you've engaged the community, how you've developed the relationships, and what's the feedback been?
Yeah, so the first point is time. And Dr. Ling knows my hang up with a 10-year internal rate of return. But so, as if every project lasts exactly 10 years. But we ran a 20-year model and a 20-year internal rate of return on our project. And that's what our deal with the city is based on. And that was actually news to a lot of people. Even the city CFO had never based a project on a 20-year internal rate of return. So just the mind shift of knowing you're in it for that long was actually a big deal. And then we negotiated a 5-year upfront period on our project that's called the infrastructure development period. But the number one obligation in our development agreement during that period is community engagement. So it's a full 5 years of upfront community engagement. And which sounded good and sounded like a great plan. And then you realize, and the guys at Lyft have realized the same thing, if you go into Paramore as the developer and attempt to engage the community, it's not credible. And there's been dozens of promises made and that have been kept or not kept, or that the mayor said he's going to, whatever. I mean, nothing, the promises by real estate development firms and white guys with money, it does not resonate in Paramore. It's not of the community. So we quickly realized that was the wrong way to approach it, and we have come at it through UCF and Valencia are leading our community engagement efforts. That's the right way to do it. It's a public university, public college. And then you do it through churches and neighborhood organizations and ultimately through Orange County Public Schools. And we've led the community engagement effort not through the real estate lens. I mean, ultimately, if you're trying to help Paramore and the area around the Citrus Bowl, they just need things and want things. And they don't understand why they don't have access to education and shopping and services and transit and all those things. So we just started at a very base level. What do you want? What do you need? And then we changed ultimately our pro forma such that we got credits or land a little cheaper so that we could provide things that the community needs. So they come in and say, we don't want you to come in and gentrify and do a bunch of retail that wouldn't be good for us. We want a neighborhood grocery store and a Walgreens and a bank and all these things. And so we adjust our thinking that way. You do the same thing with housing. You agree to a formula, and affordability mix and matrix and all that stuff. And all that came out of community engagement about what they wanted and what kind of amenities they wanted and what they felt like hadn't been provided to them over time. So I thought all that was fascinating. One of the things that we learned that was quite interesting is the community, especially the kids in the community on the engagement side, they really wanted income diversity. They do not perceive raising the level in Paramore only to a certain level. They look at mixed income like they want a millionaire living next to them, and they want to be able to see what that looks like. This is sort of like a place like Brooklyn that's really sort of reinvented itself. You have this tremendous mix of low and high income and everything. So that was a weird realization for us. We had kind of capped a lot of what we were going to do at a certain level, and we've removed that cap and now created sort of much more upward mobility such that you could stay in this project literally your whole life and go from an affordable housing project to living in $1 million condo. And that came from the neighborhood. That was not the developer driving that. That was neighborhood engagement. So, and then some of it's just typical stakeholder engagement, right, that we're all used to doing. Your designers, your whoever need to go engage the community and figure out how wide the sidewalks need to be and what parks they want. You guys have probably gotten the same thing. We got a huge message from the community that parks and open space and health and wellness and recreation and all those things were really lacking. Boys and Girls Club, those kind of deals. That was a real big, they just felt under-serviced in that neighborhood, under-resourced. So, and we're 4.5 years into that project, and so, you know, it's not a 5-year, it's a forever deal. So you will be engaging the community in perpetuity, and that's the only way you can really do it.
So your big takeaway from that is just taking the time up front to really
taking the time up front and then doing the same thing we've both done, and then realizing you don't do it as developer.
Right.
You got to do it. You got to build a board or a coalition of people, and so it's very obvious to the community that you're not doing it just to go through the motions of doing it, but that you're really doing it because you care about doing it. Because that's essentially what you get accused of sometimes in these things. Every developer essentially has to go meet with the neighborhood the way zoning and all works. But if it's obvious you're doing that just because somebody told you to do it, you're immediately discredited. Whereas I think what we both did was build stakeholders and partners and everything so that when you go sit in front or interact with those communities, you're doing it in a credible way.
If I can chime in, I totally agree with Craig. In the first few meetings that I was in, where I'm sort of presenting this great idea, and all of a sudden you get sort of arrows in your chest, arrows in the back, and I'm thinking, whoa, look, this is a volunteer effort for me, right? And I'm thinking, how in the world could there be such antagonism over something that is obviously needed? And you could immediately resort to cynicism and say, okay, well, for 50 years, sort of other programs kind of haven't really worked. So, but the fact is there's an absence of trust in a lot of these communities that it takes a long time to restore and rebuild and establish a base level of trust. There's been many years worth of failed efforts, promises made and unkept, and visions painted that never became reality, and it's a difficult solution. One of the things we learned in this book, and I recommend Toxic Charity to anybody, you can't help somebody by just giving handouts. And, we've gotten really good as a country doing that. And what we've done is created an entitlement approach that really hasn't restored and established dignity for the individual. It's sort of a senior subordinate kind of a relationship. And to Craig's point about mixed income, what Bob Lupton says in the book is what the poor need more than anything else is a caring, connected neighbor. And that's really, they want to help. The poor are no different in that sense than all of us. We want to help ourselves. We don't want to resort to handouts. So the question is, how can you help somebody without establishing this senior subordinate, subservient kind of relationship? And it takes patience and trust and really a different thinking than sort of rich white people coming in to sort of fix that's exactly right. Steve Hogan has done an amazing job at really engaging the community. Steve, you might touch on that a little bit.
Thanks, Tom. I think, the critical thing here that you're hearing, too, is that, communication is going to be everything in terms of success, and certainly our project, and I think Craig would agree with that, you have to mean it. You have to go into that effort meaning that you're looking for a partner in the residents there, because we're not just hoping to get an approval or go through the steps. We had 3 public meetings, and we're ready to go. We're going to start turning dirt. You're just kind of pushing the the goal line a little further away and not solving the problem. So, and I think what we've enjoyed at Lyft, and I don't know whether it was entirely on purpose, but whether somebody else has a hand in this coming together. But like in any great team, there's a lot of people filling roles that are needed for you to be successful. And in our case, I actually do drive to the west side of downtown every day to work. Our office is in the stadium, and so I'm in the west side of downtown every morning for 20 years. Been managing the Florida Classic, which is an amazingly popular historically black college and university game in the neighborhood since 1997, and it's a renaissance. Every year that we have it in and around that activity. So, when you think about all the people that have collected around the table with the Lyft effort, I think the communication was made a little bit easier because you'd paid all these dues, for decades, and you've been working in and around the community with the kids, and been a part of the activities that we've staged in the summer camps that we've run, and it's made it a little bit easier to kind of open the door, and create a little bit of a bond with the residents. Today we have, after 2 years, Tom, and the Polis Institute, Phil Hissom's team has been phenomenal. I mean, Phil is probably one of the great leaders in terms of his work in urban neighborhoods and really the relationships that he builds. But enough outreach and discussion that we've got now some 100 residents of that 3/4 of a square mile block around the stadium that meet in our office downstairs biweekly on the Lyft agenda. Created their own newspaper. They're all in. And I think, as Tom suggests, by having caring, connected neighbors, we all bring something to the table, including the residents, that's going to allow us to be successful. And I think that's what's special about this, and the communication piece of it, if we're not careful. A lot of us, I think Tom says this all the time, a lot of the people in the room, my assumption would be, is we got to get this thing built. We got to get it built tomorrow. What are we doing? It's been 2 years. Nothing's happening. Start freaking out, and everybody wants to leave and run away. And you got everybody, whoa, let's calm down. And then as soon as you get close to some great news, let's run out there and tell everybody. But whoa, the residents don't want to hear about that in the newspaper. They want to hear about it from their friend, their new caring, connected partner. So at any rate, I think communication is critical, and you got to mean it for it to be successful.
Okay, well, you've set up my next question, because now I'm going to ask you what you're going to do, right? So, but there's been a lot of time invested in both of these projects, but both projects are coming to a point where we're now going to start to see movement. So, dream a little bit, look forward, and it's 2020, right? What's happened at both of these projects? Certainly, there's a physical, and this is a room full of real estate practitioners, so there's a physical aspect to what we're doing. But talk about your dream or your inspiration or your thoughts around what's going on both physically but also relationally with the community. What's happening there, correct?
Yeah, so you have to realize one of the advantages everybody in this room has is we can actually sit around and talk about this and just say, we're going to build X, Y, and Z, and we all nod our head. Actually, in Paramore, that's actually one of the challenges that they can't envision. If you don't do what we do for a living, it's actually hard. When you say you're building a 250-unit apartment project, if you don't do it for a living, you have no idea what that means. And so we learned that quickly. We had to help everybody visualize, what we're going to do. And so 2020 would be, for us, we would sort of have our first phase of work open. UCF and Valencia's program is not only big, it's fast. And they would have, at that point, somewhere in the order of 6,000 to 8,000 students on the downtown campus. And we would have a couple office buildings delivered, about 600 to 800 units of student housing, and another 600 units or so of market rate and mixed income housing. So in a numbers sense, that's very easy for me to wrap my head around. I mean, I just have all of us have these fancy colored charts now that shows you what happens every year. So I mean, that's the numbers of it, as we'd be talking on that order of magnitude, which is a significant urban infill project. And that's, as you say, that's the bricks and sticks of it. And that's like these guys are going to say the same thing. We hope to have delivered X amount of units. But I really don't think about it that way. I think about it more like, the biggest thing really in my mind is we have Orange County Public Schools in the contract phase or in design for a pre-kindergarten through 8th grade public school, $40-something million school at Creative Village. And Harris Rosen is sponsoring the pre-K program, so you're going to start to engage students in that neighborhood at 2, and they're going to go all the way through 8th grade, and then they're going to go to Jones High School on a sponsored program, and they're going to go to Valencia and UCF and all the way through potentially a doctorate program at UCF. And so the human side of it says that's what's happening, is that you're now providing students in the neighborhood with that opportunity, or you walk across the street to EA game studio and you're interacting with students who are working on the latest version of Madden football or whatever, or you're walking down the street and you're I had this fascination with the life of a college town and how that'll all feel when we have thousands of students. Our downtown lacks a certain vitality, even though we've got some numbers that kind of sound impressive. We don't have a lot of street vitality. It's one of the things we struggle with. So my vision is that these thousands of students will give us that more around the clock kind of lifestyle and a real creative vibe. And so that's how I vision it like that more than I think about. We've all been to the places that are a little bit ahead of Orlando. I think about going and walking around in somewhere like Portland, Oregon, and you get that feel and you see that creativity and you kind of know what's going on and the cool stuff that's happening. So that's kind of the way I think about it, is I look forward to just being able to deliver on the promise of the environment and the opportunity more than I do the real estate sticks and bricks of it.
Okay. Tom, Steve?
I think from a real estate perspective, when you go through areas of concentrated poverty, what you see visually for real estate people, we always say, well, there's opportunities here. What's the economic drivers and that sort of thing? And there's no question mixed income housing is a critical part of the equation. But I just for a moment want you to understand the complexity of what we're all talking about here and why Craig said it is not a sort of a 2 or a 5 or even a 10-year. These are 20-year and longer transformations. So the first thing you do is you get data. Well, data would show that in some of these areas we're talking about on the west side, crime is 21 times the city average, 21 times. So you say, okay, well, obviously you got to fix the crime problem. It's a safety issue. Let's fix the safety issue. And then you dig deeper and you realize that high school dropouts commit 75% of the crimes and are 8 times more likely to be incarcerated. So you say, oh, well, you kind of can't fix the crime problem until you fix the education problem. You got to fix the education problem. Let's do that. That's a good idea. Let's fix the education problem. Well, then you dig into the education problem and you realize that in 3rd grade, 100% of the 3rd graders at Orange Center Elementary transfer, 100%. These kids go to different schools every year. The absenteeism, because of health care, because of lack of transportation, because of family challenges and struggles, the absenteeism creates a lack of productivity in the classroom, which creates and contributes to lack of graduation. The achievement gap is, everybody knows the achievement gap between high-income schools and low-income schools is just, it's unjust. So you say, wow, you kind of can't fix the education issue until you fix the housing issue, because these folks are moving every 3 to 6 months, just living paycheck to paycheck, and you go, oh my goodness, it's too complicated, let's just give up, right? I mean, you can't do that. So what we're trying to focus on is a geographically concentrated approach in both of these efforts, focusing on a holistic approach to solving the most complex problems, which includes housing, education, health and wellness, and jobs, transportation, all of those things at the same time, with a lead organization driving an agenda led by primarily the business community in partnership with the public sector and best-in-class nonprofits. Now you fast forward 10, 15, 20 years, what does that look like? Clearly it looks like you're going to have substantial improvement in the physical plant, the buildings, mixed income housing, shopping centers. There's no grocery stores in these areas. These folks buy their groceries at the corner gas station. Now, you think about the food options available at a corner gas station, that's not what you'd call a health and wellness kind of an approach. The organic choices are somewhat limited at the 7-Eleven. But from an education standpoint, our vision is the schools in this area from kindergarten through high school would be the top 10% performing schools across all of Orlando, and compared to other sort of similar demographic profile, we hope to be at a top 5% kind of performance level. That's sort of the education goal that we're establishing, and that we're inviting partners to join with us to strive for that. Clearly, mixed income housing, we want to see a variety of mixed income housing options for all ages, including elderly and seniors as well. We clearly want crime to come down so it's no worse than city average. Those are some of the goals that we've established. From a safety, health, and wellness standpoint, Steve has single-handedly shepherded an effort to redo some of the area parks, and he'll, I'm sure, touch on that a little bit. And then, obviously, we want to see jobs. We want to see jobs homegrown in this area. We want to see unemployment no worse than city average. So those are some of the things that we're excited about over a 10 or 15-year profile.
I think just to put a bow on that, Tom hit on all the indicators that we're going to measure ourselves for. So 20 years from now, to me, success would be that we've hit all these indicators, but we've done it largely with the residents that live there today or have lived there, in the last couple of generations. So to me, we've done it in that vein versus just kind of created or infilled and invited in folks that want to enjoy that success. I think, I'd be ecstatic if we did it together with the folks that are part of our team now that live next door. So
that's great. So last question. In the room, certainly you have a lot of folks from cities all over Florida, but you also have a lot of folks from cities all over the Southeast. Give us some lessons learned, and we've touched on some of these, but give us some reflection on lessons learned, best practices. If somebody's inspired here within the communities they live in, what would they need to do? What would some steps they might want to take, in the communities they live in?
I think the first thing that I got comfortable with is that this is being done in a lot more cities across the country. Tom and I have a mutual friend, James Field at Bank of America Community Development Corporation. They've done this in very challenging circumstances in Baltimore and in New Orleans and in Detroit. And you can go to ULI and look at case studies on these, so it looks kind of daunting in the beginning. Orlando's typically not a leader in some of this stuff, but you look at what's happened across the country. This has really been kind of a long time coming, frankly, for our community to step up and essentially align private business resources, government resources, and charitable or community efforts. So in some ways, I would say it might not be as difficult, at least, to get information as you think. And the other thing I would say, if you're inspired in your community, is it is very difficult for someone out of town to come in town and do this. It's going to be locally led. It doesn't mean you ultimately don't have joint venture developer partners that might be expert in a certain type of housing or something that come from out of town. But local stakeholders are going to have to lead these type of projects. I mean, you're just not going to get the commitment and the local flavor and sort of what you said, the personal touch. And you just aren't going to feel the moral responsibility if you're an out-of-town developer just going in somewhere else to make a profit versus what we all feel. We feel this. We've been looking at a lot of these people in the eye for years and telling them we're going to make a difference, and ultimately that kind of keeps you up at night. You want to figure that out, and you're intellectually challenged to figure that out. If you read the Toxic Charity book, you cannot put your head down after you do that without thinking that you're motivated to fix it. And so that's the part I would say is if that's the way your entrepreneurial mind works, you can do it in your own community, and there's resources there to do it. And I would also tell you that all of us love to talk about it. So real estate folks, I think, are great at sharing information in the first place, and certainly have been helpful to me throughout my career. But if anybody ever calls about our project and what we're doing, I mean, we will send you everything, our pro forma, everything we do. It's probably all public record anyway, I guess, from some of the public partners we have. But I mean, we share everything, and we are happy to tell you what we're doing and what our plan is, and if we've got a great idea, and I'll tell you all the ideas I've stolen from other cities and whatnot. But I mean, it's really it might not be as tough as you'd think. But I would emphasize, and you guys did it with Florida Hospital and some people right at the beginning, you got to go get people that aren't real estate people. They're community people or health and wellness people or other stakeholders to drink the Kool-Aid, because selling this room on housing and new urbanism and all this stuff, that ain't the audience. I mean, this is a different deal. The audience is the community, and ultimately the real estate guy in the community, I wouldn't say we're number one on any, neighborhoods list, but you start bringing in hospitals and community organizations and schools and public universities and whatnot, so if you're seeking this out and you think you might be excited about it, go poke around with people like that, universities, hospitals, community organizations, see if they're interested, just like you guys did, and then you might get a spark.
Yep. Thanks. Go ahead, Steve.
Yeah, I think one of the big lessons learned is be prepared for spending a lot of time on this for the next 20 plus years. This is not something you're going to get done quickly, so prepare yourself for that, or you're going to fail. I think communication, as we continue to say, is critical. Need to over communicate as part of that process, but you certainly can learn from other people. And I think Tom, what was fun is after about probably Tom, 6-8 months worth of meetings, we mapped out this collective impact strategy and mixed income housing and cradle career education and wellness and jobs and access to job training. We were wanting to build this kind of infrastructure around our plan, and then we went and met with a team in East Lake, Atlanta called Purpose Built Communities, which is a Tom Cousins project. Those of you that maybe have seen East Lake has actually done this, for the last 20 years and built this roadmap. They were so successful that Warren Buffett came in and said, look, I'm going to fund you. I'm going to pay 100% of the bills for you to kind of take this show on the road. I want you to run around and tell people what you spent 20 years learning. And so we flew up and met with this team, and it was kind of funny. We're sitting there, 35, 40 minutes into the presentation, and Tom kind of stops him and says, wait, look, every single thing that he took us through, we had already kind of arrived at those conclusions ourselves. So it was that endorsement of the fact that we were on the right track. But since then, they've been our contracted partner in town, and they're doing this in New Orleans and the Bayou District and a whole host of other areas with tremendous success. But there's a lot of great resources out there if you're willing to listen and learn, I think is the key.
Tom, let me, it strikes me you're such a patient guy. On this, yeah. So, but I mean, I want to frame that, because what strikes me about this is, and particularly, what I know about the personality of this room, we're project folks, we're deal individuals, right? And so we see something, we see a vision, we want to create it. We may want to harvest, and we move on in some sense. And what you all are saying, though, is that even if it's a 20-year pro forma, it's really not. I mean, what we're really talking, if you want to do this in your community, you're saying you have to stay in it. I mean, it's almost a forever project if you're going to have success. I mean, how was that for you? How was that shift for you personally?
I was actually going to say exactly that point. So
remember that next week on the annual review.
This is not a project. This is a calling. This is really a calling. I'm a faith-based guy. All of us are motivated by different things, whatever it is. That's sort of the God that we've created, perhaps. I'm a faith-based person, and I firmly believe that more is expected from those to whom more is given, right? I can't read the Bible without being struck with my responsibility for the poor and the vulnerable and the fatherless and the widow and the orphan, right? So this is just a way for me to use my vocation and the role that I'm in and the seat that I sit in at CNL in an effort that can fulfill that calling on my life. So all of you are motivated by different things, But if this sort of tugs on your heart and becomes a calling, understand this isn't sort of a 3-month calling, because there's been a lot of 3-month callings, and that's what's created to the lack of trust in these communities. It's a 10-year or 15-year or 20-year kind of calling, and it is going to take time, and it's not always going to reap monetary rewards. We don't expect any monetary rewards out of Lift Orlando. We're a nonprofit. We're just trying to drive an agenda to really create permanent transformation for areas of concentrated poverty and do it in a holistic, collective impact, collaborative kind of an approach. But I really firmly believe it to be a long-term calling. It's like the advice you give to your kids when they're trying to find vocations. You say, match your skill sets with your passion. Don't so much focus on how much money you're going to make. If you get your passions aligned with your skills, you're going to be happy for a very long period of time, and that's really what this is for me.
Well, I want to thank all three of you. I mean, hopefully the room got a snapshot. Certainly, you know, the professional aspect and the real estate aspect, but to kind of share your passion and your heart. That's a big deal, and I want to thank you and thank everybody for this time together. Thank you very much.